Yeah, we're here this afternoon in beautiful Manitou Regional Park and talking with a couple of longtime CBK technicians, Wayne Bjorndal and Orrin McIntosh. And I'm not sure who started first, or if you want to talk about that.
The old
Orrin
guy.
started first.
I don't know. No, you were at Carmen, and you came. I was summer relief technician here. You came and took the job.
Summer relief technician.
Yes. And in the next year, I was summer relief technician under you.
Yeah.
You were one of the operating technicians, and I was a summer relief.
Yeah.
And during that summer, one of the technicians left.
Wayne, you were going to university then, were you not?
No, well, I went to university for the 1 year, but then when I came back here, I was helping build the motel.
Yeah. Okay.
And we were running the motel, and
well, now Wayne, tell me, when did you retire?
When did I retire? When I got tired. Well, see, I left here in '70, and I retired in gotta get it right now. 80. Well, I was 55 when I retired. I'm 77, so 22 years ago. So I've been retired for 22 years.
That's a long retirement.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to making it at least 35, so it's be even more than I was.
So it was 85.
Yeah.
I retired. Now, I have it figured different. I think the last time I figured I worked must have been 25 years ago.
Yeah. Well, we won't say that on the camera.
No, okay. But
Too late.
but I guess
the joke we used to have around there was with Stan Stacy, who was our caretaker, and he'd come in there and polishing the floor and mowing the grass out there, and come in, and we'd be sitting there monitoring the transmitter. And he said, how come you guys get paid so much more than I do, and I'm working and working and working? And he said, we just kept on telling him, which really turned his crank. Well, we get paid for what we know, not for what we do.
That's a good way to do it.
yeah.
Well, maybe let's go through some of these questions here. Just little topics, and maybe it'll spark some discussion. And we're just totally informal, so we'll go wherever it goes. CBK, what do those letters mean, and where did they come from?
Well, Henry Kelsey is the name of the manager, so to speak, explorer with the Hudson Bay Company. Or what do they call it? Working out of Hudson Bay. They had a name for the organization. But I actually had to go to Wikipedia and look it up, and there was about six pages of information about his history. But it was named after he was here. He traveled across the prairies from 1690 to 1692 is the area of time when he worked here and was mapping out the country, and he was one of the first ones.
So did you ever call it CB Kelsey, or did you call it CBK, or?
It's always been CBK, and the question asked why, you know, and I still ask the question when I go into the broadcast center sometimes, and I've asked it enough that most people answer them great.
So they know.
Yeah.
So why was the transmitter built in that location, like the CBK transmitter?
It would have been because centrally located, of course, in the prairie provinces, and then the ground conductivity was perfect.
The original plan to build CBK, its broadcasting station, was to put it down around Wolseley. Then they realized that the signal at 50 kilowatts would be too strong to go across an international border under international rules. And in order to keep it from being that, they have to make it very directional, which was both more costly and questionable if it would still do the job. So that came up here was the next best place. Centrally located CN, rail lines with good copper wire to make program links. And I still can't get over the fact that we had a hard time getting a bandpass at 10 kilohertz over copper wire on the telegraph lines, and now we're getting television and everything on the same type of circuits once everything went digital.
And of course, another thing was the fact that we were on 540 which was a clear channel frequency, and they were lucky to get 540, and there was no way that they were going to reduce power at night because of the 50 kilowatts or go directional. It was and they did get good coverage up north with this. It was a great coverage. The Northern Messenger used to prove that. It was the only way up north that they ever heard anything was because of CBK.
And there used to be messages sent to the RCMP, encoded messages, like, John, call home. Your mother wants to hear from you. And that would be a message saying,
over the radio.
over the radio.
Oh, okay.
Message meaning something else.
Yeah, no, I've seen a couple references on the internet. They're calling it the legendary CBK because it was state of the art and it was one of the largest.
The Northern Messenger was mostly produced from Winnipeg on a Friday night. Norm Micklewright was an announcer that used to work here at CBK in that town, and a French, I forget the French.
Yeah, we had a French department.
But I always liked being on the transmitter when the Northern Messenger was on because it was so interesting, you know, and you really felt for these people up there. They were so isolated. And,
so what was the Northern Messenger? That was a program?
It was a program primarily on toward Christmas time, but it was a program, it was about a monthly, wasn't it? Something like that, once a month or something of that nature. But it was a program intended to bring messages from the people down south who often were in TB care hospitals and homes.
Okay.
And they're telling their people up north how they were. So frequently it was in the native tongues from the north. So you'd sit there and hear this going through, and you hadn't a clue what they're talking about, but you had made sure that they were talking and it was getting through.
Okay.
Yeah, but it always was done getting close to midnight and dark when the atmospheric conditions were best for a good long ground coverage.
And it really didn't have a time set. It would start right about midnight.
About midnight.
And it depending how many messages they had to relay, you know, it didn't really. It was a very relaxed, and it was so interesting. And all those native places that, because of the Northern Messenger, we knew how to pronounce, you know, Pangerton. You know, all those different names up there was interesting.
So how long did they run that? How many years, or when did it finish up?
She was,
you know, I can't really recall either.
On those CBC times that I was showing you on the internet, you might get a clue because they did show up as part of the programming on Friday nights.
Definitely
so
once ANIC went up, I think they started getting in more phone messages and things like that back and forth once the ANIC satellite went up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So probably after satellite sort of came in, then that kind of
kind
of declined a little bit.
Yeah, two-way radios with the satellite, and then on into cell phones, of course. Another story. But mind you, the situation is much better now because they've got better hospitalization in the north and better coverage for them.
Yeah,
so TB sanatoriums are almost a thing of the past.
Yeah. Do you can you tell us a little bit about when you guys started and a little bit about your years there, how many years and when you finished up, kind of thing? Maybe start with Wayne there.
Well, my start of the summer in May actually of 57, and I worked that summer, and there was an opening came in that fall, and I applied for the opening, and some guy from Carmen, Manitoba bumped me.
Who was that?
Yeah, who was that? So Oren came home.
Yeah.
To that, and then the next summer, George McFadden, who was the manager here at the time, or the chief operator, called me and asked me if I'd come back and be summer relief operator again. And so, oh, sure. So I came back that summer as well, and again in the fall, around halfway through the summer, one of the guys took a transfer someplace else. And I put my application in for it, and I got the job. Now, there's a long story behind that. I don't know if, have you ever had a chance to look at some of those old files in that desk that was upstairs when you were supervising? Because there was a file there about that position.
Oh,
And I've left it because I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And what, you know, I look at this. Well, when I got the job, the chief engineer who was from Winnipeg at the time came, or no, from Montreal, Roy Cahoon, who essentially was the engineer building the plant, came out here and wanted to go for a talk with me. And he said, "Well, you know, you've got the position." I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, it's generally only engineers that get these jobs." You know, I said, "Oh, I understand that, but I'm an electrician, and that was one of my key things." So, and he said, "Well, let's go for a talk." And so I walked around that whole perimeter with him, and he was telling me how they were going to be depending on me and hoping that it would work out and that I could handle the work, you know. And so all of a sudden I'm wiping my brow, and about 10 years or so later, I become the coordinator there, supervising tech. But essentially it was all the same job, you got stuck with the paperwork.
Right.
And I opened up this drawer, and there was a file considering that position. So I took the file out, and it wasn't very thick. I opened it up, went through the applications. There was only one application, mine. There hadn't been anybody else asking for the job. So they were stuck with me.
Yeah. And then you said you moved to Regina in the 70s?
When the CBC took over the CHAB television, and there was that swap around there. CKCK became the CTV outlet. CHAB Moose Jaws TV became the CBC outlet. And the CBC took it over, and they asked me to come down there to help organize the shops business and get the technicians used to having to do the paperwork we get stuck with within the corporation. So I went from all of a sudden knowing all about TV, radio transmitters, to sitting on a TV studio and stuff like that. It was very difficult.
CBC in Regina.
CBC in Regina, yes.
And approximately what year would that have been that you...
Well, we moved to Moose Jaw, what was it, 70, I think it was. And then we were there for about 5 years, and they were starting to build facilities in Regina, so it was lucky enough that we moved over there about the same time as my oldest son was going to be starting college or university. So we moved over to Regina then, and was there as they were progressing with the building of the broadcast center and the TV and FM and facilities in Regina.
Right. And Orrin,
he stuck to the guns here.
well, I started I had hardly got out of grade 12 till I got a job, summer relief, in Regina, CKCK. So I went through the summer there at CKCK, and the next thing I know, I got a job CFQC. And while I was working at CFQC, the CBC put on a golf tournament. Canadian, for all Canada, the big golf tournament, and they were going to broadcast it from Saskatoon. Well, I'm working at CFQC, and the CBC came to CFQC in case they needed extra microphones or they needed this or that. So I kind of became a gopher. And through all this, I met Roy Cahoon. And you know how you do things or things happen, And anyway, there was a fella from CBK working there, Frank Duffield, was working with this crew that were putting on this golf tournament, and they were using walkie-talkies, CBC, which was really something at this time. But anyway, I got to know Roy pretty good, and he asked me, he said, if you would be interested in, joining the CBC, and I said, sure, because I had a pretty good idea that it would be better money and one thing and another. So in 52 or 53, now when I think it was 53, that was that year we got married anyway.
I was just a kid then.
And by golly, Roy phoned me and he said, there's an opening in Carmen. Do you want it? And I'm, yes, you know, no doubt about it. So I put in my resignation at CFQC, and the next thing I know, we got married in the end of June, and I was supposed to start work on the 1st of July. That was my, and I went in and saw Roy, and I said, well, I'm here. I told him I just got married, and he says, you just got married? Yeah. And he said, well, he says, you haven't had a honeymoon yet. He said, tell you what I'll do. We'll give you 10 days. You report to Carmen on the 10th. So that's how come my anniversary date was the 10th, because Roy was good enough to give us 10 days, and there was a place there to live, and that was really the way I started in Carmen, where 2 of our children were born there. And then the opening, there was the opening, like Wayne says, there was an opening. That was Ian Stevens that was leaving, and the opening, and they said, sure, you know, they at that time, if the reason I gave them was because our parents lived in Watrous, and Arlene's parents were in Rosetown, so it was an easy move, and that's how come I came to Watrous.
Yeah. How many years were you in Carmen?
Well, I started in 53, and I guess I moved to Watrous in 57.
So about 4 years or something like that.
Yeah.
57, and then you retired in 80?
I retired in 85. Actually, I can't remember if it was 85 or 86, because after I retired, I kept on as a monitor for a while.
Yep.
Just a paid increase.
Yeah, you know, but everything was running good. We had our own remote control, and it was working, and that was.
Yeah.
We went through some bad times, and we went, you know, mostly good times. But we had some bad. Tower coming down was a bad time. We had a fire. It was a bad time, you know. And
So did you guys do similar jobs?
Very similar.
Yeah. And so what did your? Well, I know Oren's already on our other video talked about some of the things that he did, but what were generally some of the things that you did during your day at work?
Well, you know, it could go into a great big detail of nothing, or just the main job we had there was keeping the place running.
Yeah.
And that consisted of meter readings every half hour, actually, at some times, depending on the time of the year, down to the mundane stuff like taking a broom and going and sweeping the peach fuzz off the air intake system because it was getting hot. You know, water-cooled equipment, when it was running fine, but if all of a sudden, for some reason, the town water system gave up, then we had to have a little trouble. Sometimes we had to reduce power because of that, very infrequently.
So say if say like a tube blew in the transmitter or something like that, then you would be the ones to figure out which tube it was or whatever, and then do the actual change.
The ones that gave us, I would say, the most trouble would be the 857Bs.
The rectifiers.
The rectifier tubes, the mercury-filled rectifier tubes, because after the Quebec crisis, the RCMP wanted us to get rid of them because they are mercury vapor tubes, and they had mercury in them. And we informed them that we're off the air if we quit using mercury vapor tubes, and they really didn't care too much, but they allowed us to have enough to keep going. That's what we couldn't hold back a whole bunch of spares. And so they took a bunch of these old tubes, and we thought they were going to be very careful with them, and then they took them out to the dump and blew them up with their rifle or with the pistols. But we won't say how much mercury there was about but no, a tablespoon of mercury in each one of those things.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
yeah. There was mercury. They were so easy to make a switch with the mercury because
Yeah.
you just had to have mercury in a glass tube.
Yep.
With the contacts that went in and just tip it. You had a
Typical Honeywell thermometer.
Yeah.
you had a real good, yeah.
So how often did something go wrong with the transmitter that you had to replace a tube or something like that?
Our downtime was less than 0.001%.
Oh.
I had to do charts. They were complaining about us being off the air so much. So I ended up, the first computer, the Radio Shack Coco, I made up a graph for them to show that here was our on-air time and here was our off-air time, you know, type of a thing. And that was the thing that occasionally, like, we had to make pages of reports anytime we were off the air, more than 1 second.
Yeah.
So, and there was one clock started and the other one stopped exactly when we had problems. So we tried to keep it down to a minimum. The transmitter itself, the biggest problem I think, and I think it was Ian had it. The thing went off the air one day and he couldn't get it to come back on, putting it on, and he found a mouse had managed to get into those air capacitors partway through, and he ended up having to dismantle the sections to get down to scrape the remains off the plates so it wouldn't arc again.
Wow.
But well, all that time, of course, we could still operate on 5 kilowatts. So Watrous was covered good.
Yeah.
Not many else, but Watrous was covered.
And with the tube life, if you did your job right and you did the monitoring right of the readings, as a rule, you would see a reading dropping during the day, and you would know pretty well which tube was beginning to let go. For example, when you started up in the morning, the first thing you did was make sure you had water on the 898. You didn't do anything else until you had water and your flow meters were working. You knew how much water. And then the next thing you would do, you would turn on the filaments, and you could actually look in to the tube and count the strands that were lit.
Okay.
Was 6, was it not?
Yep.
And then if you had 6 strands going, you knew everything else was going good, because that's usually what failed in the 898s was maybe a filament strand. So there was all kinds of the monitoring, the reading the meters was very important, and keeping track of stuff from 1 hour to another, and then when you new operator came on, you would let him know what you suspected was going or was going to go. But I think our biggest problem for a long time wasn't so much power failures, which wasn't our problem, which was line failures. We had a lot of line problems with the old system because we were using CNR open line. Went from here to Saskatoon for a while, and then it went to Regina.
Before Regina came in, it came right from Winnipeg to here.
Yeah,
on the main
on
line.
the CN.
But,
we rented the CNR.
So you're talking about the signal that came from, or
The
the
audio.
Yeah,
the audio that came
Just
from.
the audio.
Yeah.
The audio.
Yeah.
And there was 3 networks, was there not, Wayne?
Yeah. Well,
And the French network.
There was a French network. There was this
TransCanada
network and the Dominion network.
and the Dominion.
And
Yeah.
the Dominion network was providing networking service to the private stations like CFQC, CKCK, radio. They were fed with the Dominion network. But the TransCanada network, which the CBK was on, when they put the studios in, 57? No. When was it, 57 or something? They put the studios in Regina? No, 53. They moved the studios from Winnipeg back to Regina. 47, they went from here to Winnipeg. Then they moved back to Regina in 53, I believe it was. Yeah. And the lines for then came by CP from Regina to Renown, or to Young. They transferred at Young to the CN line coming back this way. And we'd get some very weird effects sometimes. We'd be sitting there early in the morning waiting for this program to come on, and you get this singing sound, high frequency singing on the line, and as the sun came up and the weather warmed up, it disappeared. In the evening, or if it rained a little bit, it'd come back. And we got a hold of the CN guy, and they'd go on the old pumper up along the track, and they'd find a fishing line wrapped around the line.
Oh, okay.
And when the fishing line got wet, it got what they called an unbalance on the system. And so he'd go and get that fishing line off there, then we'd be fine again until somebody else went like this and caught a fishing line around them. But that one winter, remember? What was that one winter when we all of a sudden lost the feed completely? We couldn't get the sound. They were feeding it to us, and we ended up getting a hold of them on the telephone. The backup line didn't work, and we ended up feeding the program by a telephone for a short period of time. And it was in the wintertime, the winter of the deep snows. And so again, the guy got on his little trolley and going along the lines like this. All of a sudden, there wasn't no lines. The telegraph stuff was steel, iron lines, but all that we used carrier, and some of the other ones they had were copper. All the copper was gone over a 2-mile stretch.
From the snow?
No. Somebody crawled up the lines, cut this copper, and took the whole string, rolled them up, and threw them in the back of a truck. A few days later, a guy pulled into the transmitter site here, and I went out and, yeah, can I help you? Yeah, he said, you don't have any old copper you want to sell, do you? And I said, well, no, we really don't. We have some copper tubes and things. He said, well, if you got any old of them, I'll take them. He says, I picked up some junk along the way.
Oh. He thought it was.
I don't know where he got it, but it was sure nice looking copper wire.
It might have been the one, eh?
So that was some of the two major problems. It was an embarrassing one for a lineman. One time we had an outage, and he actually took his phone and clipped it across our backup line and made a negative comment, swear word, which you did not do on the CBC. If you said anything worse than darn, even then you could be in trouble. And he said much worse than that. And he ended up apologizing and got himself some time off, I guess, things like that. Now they don't care what you say, it seems.
When I first started as a transmitter operator, we used to have to type out. We had a typewriter, and we used to have to type out every station break, what program, when it started, all the outages. And you were really kept busy because we weren't expert at typing, any of us, you know. And there was a lot more to it in the early days. And thank goodness they didn't have the commercials they have today. But you had to type it out, and of course that report would go into the office. You know, that was the program log. Yeah. That was the final. Whatever went on the air, that's what you had to do, and it was up to the transmitter operator to, if there was something on the air that, like Wayne said, bad language or something, you're supposed to cut it, and put in a feed.
Right.
Put in your own feed.
Did you ever have to make a station break yourself, manually?
No, but if you want to know the most embarrassing thing that I ever did, was at Carmen, November the 11th. Figure this out.
Oh, yes.
Now,
I've come that close.
And when you were a transmitter operator, you didn't really care what was on the air as long as there was something on the air. Music, somebody talking. And I'm sitting there doing my job, you know, and forgetting that it's November the 11th and it's 11 o'clock in the morning. And of course, all of a sudden I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I haven't heard anything for 30 seconds. I don't realize that we're in the 2-minute silence. Yeah. So what do? I quickly, I've got a a record sitting there, and I just put her on the air. We're right in the middle of the 2 minutes silence. And of course, the phone started ringing, and that was Winnipeg. And I never really saw the report. I didn't really want to see the report, but they didn't fire me, so.
But too hard to replace.
That was one time that, you know, if you had been paying maybe just a little bit more attention to the programming, but it was funny. You could be working there, you know, and the thing that you never wanted to hear at a transmitter was silence.
Yeah.
Wasn't that right?
Yep.
And if a motor or something quit or something changed, boy, you would hear that right away. And it was with the programming. As long as there was somebody talking, you were happy.
Yeah. Sound of silence. But an interesting, in relation to these station break things, I was fortunate. I didn't work very long when there was commercials because they were a pain. But we were informed that if we had a problem with the transmitter during a commercial, the corporation was losing equivalent of $75 a minute in commercial revenue, and that's in the 50s. So just imagine what that is today.
Oh, yeah.
And now, the outage time, I don't think anybody cares.
Well, like right now, the logging, as that's concerned for CBK here, and the control of it right now is all in Toronto. They have monitoring lines going back, and they have outage. They have a monitoring system in Regina that monitors the transmitter off air for peaks and volume, not for quantity or not for quality, but quantity. Yeah. And if it goes off for more than so many seconds, it triggers an alarm, which also triggers the alarm down to Toronto. But the main thing here is it triggers an alarm in Regina for the switchboard operator. And the switchboard operator notifies the transmitter maintenance department, which is notifying a voicemail. Yeah. And then periodically the guys on the transmitter department check their voicemail and say, oh, Waters is off. Okay, I'll let Saskatoon know, etc., etc.
Well, that's the TV, you know. TV is so important. Yeah. You can imagine what would happen in the middle of the Rose Bowl or the Super Bowl.
Well, I've had that happen.
If you lost, you know, anything at all. So it's just the way that the radio is. And you know, it's an interesting thing, but that RCA transmitter that we ran had a real good record. I think it was one of the best records for that particular transmitter that RCA had for running as long as it did. We kept it going years after, I think.
Past its lifetime. Yeah, they replaced the one in Sackville much sooner than they had to replace the one here.
What would that be? Good preventative maintenance kind of thing?
A lot of that, good maintenance and care and its upkeeping and starting. We would tell here if somebody came in late and fired it up, bang, 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 bang. The rest of us had trouble all day. Little kickouts and a little bit of trouble all day.
Didn't warm up right. The
but
tubes, the rectifiers would tell you.
Yeah. You look in there and they'd be all sitting there, and this one has a kind of an orangish blue glow. And you watch that one because eventually during the day it's going to go back on again, but it kicks you out. Yeah. And these little arc overs. So you usually had it in the number 6 position, right next to had a spare running all the time. So bypass these. But if it happened to be the one over there, you had to pull the block off here, run around the other side, pull the block off, put it down, come back and put a block in this side again.
Yeah. And of course, that usually meant that you blew a fuse on the filters, and that was like a shotgun going off right next to you. Yeah. And that was always interesting too, because you had to run in there and put a new fuse on, see how fast you could get in there and get out.
Get out again, yeah. And did you ever have that relay go up in smoke?
Yep.
That's when I found out I knew the circuit. I thought I knew the control circuit very well
Yeah.
until I went in there and found out that even though the thing is supposed to be shut off, one side of it was still 110 to ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you replaced something like that, you would have to shut the power down to everything, probably.
And one of those type of. It was a relay usually.
Yeah. As a rule, if you had a arc back or an outage, the transmitter would shut itself down.
Oh.
As a rule, there was all kinds of protective relays and overload relays and stuff that would shut it down. And you might on a rectifier, you might just try and turn it back on to make sure which rectifier it was. But as a rule, once you open the door, everything was, the high voltage stuff was automatically grounded, and everything was off for you as soon as you opened the door. So,
If you knew you had to do some work on the big 50 kilowatt portion of it, you could throw a switch and just run on the 5,000 watt part.
Right.
And that would be an emergency situation. You'd have a signal going out, but it would not be that reliable in distances or in two cities where there's a higher noise level.
I believe at the beginning of the war, when the transmitter first went on, they did run low power. You could run 20 kilowatts. You could run a delta and Y concrete on
Configuration
your
of transformers.
on plate transformers, and you could run low power. They did run for a while, I believe, but they were soon back up to 50 when they realized that there wasn't anybody going to come over and blow the place up.
They were suspicious that the Japanese might be homing in on 540.
Yeah.
They didn't realize that even on 5 kilowatts up there, they could pick it up anyway.
Yeah.
So that changed the thing. Then, actually, 540